In this video, I'd like to explain a couple key differences in the two types of handheld power saws that we have here in the shop. We have a circular saw and a jig saw. These are very different saws and they're useful for very different things. They can be very dangerous, so I want to explain how to be safe with them. Now, first off, the circular saw that you see here, it has an adjustable plate which has this little lever in the back. You can pull up on that and adjust how deep your cut is. This is a saw that is meant to be used with your right hand, left hand on the front. You run it along the board like this. I will demonstrate here in a moment. You can also adjust the angle of the plate. You see here there's this little lever in the front. When you pull up on that, then you can make a different angled cut. If you needed to make a miter. There is a lever on the top that raises and lowers the safety guide. You need to be careful about that. Only use that whenever absolutely necessary. In general, let the safety guide do what it's going to do. Now, this is similar to the table saw, only it's handheld. What that means is, if you twist this while you're cutting, or you hit a knot or something like that, it can jerk back. You can get sort of a kickback. So that means that you want to have your board clamped down tight when you're cutting. You don't want any of your fingers or your leg or any other bodily appendage close to this blade as you're cutting something. The jigsaw, on the other hand, uses a much different blade. Instead of a large circular blade like the table saw, it uses a very small blade. You can see right here. And jigsaw is good for cutting curves and scroll work. It doesn't make a very clean cut, so typically you have to sand the edges of whatever you've cut. But you could think of this similar to the bandsaw. Now, this also has a few different adjustments, including the angle of the cut and the angle of the plate. You can also adjust the speed of the blade. The speed adjustment for this saw is in the back, right here. It's a little dial. And you would use that if you were cutting different materials that required a slow or a fast cut. Mostly with plywood, you're going to want to leave it at its top speed, but something like metal, you might want to slow it down a lot. And there is this easy release button here on the front, which just slides forward for you to switch out the blades. There's also a little button on the side here that will keep the trigger engaged. Be very careful about that. I think that's a very dangerous option, especially if you've not used this tool very much. Okay, I'm going to make a sample cut with the circular saw here. I've got it all plugged in. One thing you may notice on this circular saw is that there's a little bit of duct tape around the cord. Don't be afraid of it, it's not going to shock you, but this just means that somebody wrapped the cord a little bit too tight and caused a little bend in it. Now, I have my apron on, I took off my ring, I'm wearing safety glasses, which you can't see in this shot, and I've put up my long flowing beautiful hair, ha ha ha, and I'm going to go ahead and do a sample cut with this circular saw. It's all plugged in and ready to go. Now what you're going to notice when I make this cut is that as I cut through the board, this safety guard is going to slowly move out of the way. Now if I was ever making a cut where I needed to move it for some reason, I could use this top lever while I was cutting. But that's a little bit dangerous, and I wouldn't do that until you're used to using the saw. Here we go. Bad. Also notice that my board is firmly clamped into the table vise so that it doesn't move around while I'm cutting. Let's go ahead and make a sample cut with the jigsaw. I've got it all plugged in, and the first thing I'm going to do is check to make sure that I like the angle of the plate. And if I need to change that, I pull this lever right here and I can swivel it around until it is at whatever angle I want. My board is clamped in place, and here's that trigger lock that I mentioned before. So you want to be careful of that when you're using it. The best way to use one of these saws, you can use them one-handed. They're a little bit safer than the circular saw, but you can also have a hand in front if you feel like you need it. Well, that didn't go well. So the problem with that last cut was that this board shifted around. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a spring clamp. So I've spaced this out a little bit more from the table, and I can just squeeze this, and now this is going to hold the board to the table, and then the table clamp holds it in place. Let's try that again. That's better. So as you saw, it's very important to have your workpiece securely clamped to a table or a work surface. Be careful, as with any saw, to have the right amount of clearance, and make sure that you're not cutting through the table or a clamp or something else that's important when you're making your cut. When you're all done using these saws, wrap the cord up, not too tight, and then clean up your debris and sawdust so that we don't have a slipping hazard.